Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to explore a truly paradigm-shifting perspective on personal growth. We're diving into Wang Liji's absolutely fascinating approach to secular spiritual practice. Essentially, we're taking ancient concepts and translating them into the ultimate cognitive tech upgrade for your daily life. Because, let's be real, if you've ever felt like traditional spirituality is just completely disconnected from your busy modern reality, this explainer is going to connect those dots for you. Okay, so let's jump right into a pretty provocative question. Do you really need a meditation cushion, a wise master, or a remote monastery to achieve true self-awareness? Well, Wang Liji actually argues no. He doesn't meditate, he hasn't converted to a religion, and he certainly isn't seeking some mythical enlightenment in an afterlife. And yet his daily life is a rigorously disciplined practice. He totally challenges the standard, traditional definition of what it even means to be a practitioner. Section 1. Redefining modern spiritual practice. Moving beyond the monastery. To redefine practice for the modern, secular person, Wang approaches human consciousness purely through first principles. He points out that a lot of people practice with the goal of accumulating merit for a better afterlife. But he looks at it super logically. He says, look, if an afterlife does exist, a life lived with extreme clarity right here and now is naturally going to lead to a good one, right? And if it doesn't exist, well, you definitely don't want to waste this life. So regardless of whether there's a next life or not, mastering the here and now is literally our most logical, optimal starting point. Section 2. Internal mind versus external action. Bridging the gap. Wang breaks this whole thing down into two totally distinct areas. First, you have cultivating the mind. This is your invisible internal monologue. It's that immediate, hidden gut reaction you have to an event. Then, on the flip side, you have external practice. That's how you actually speak and act toward other people. But here is the major catch. If you curse someone out 100 times in your head, but force this polite fake smile on your face, your internal cultivation hasn't actually caught up to your outward practice. True practice, which the philosopher Wang Yangming called the unity of knowledge and action, requires the internal to perfectly, seamlessly align with the external. Section 3. Your cognitive operating system. Uncovering the default programs. So why is there such a massive gap? Why do we sometimes read, say, 500 books on psychology, know exactly the right thing to do, but still fly off the handle and into a rage when things go wrong? Well, it all comes down to your brain running a millisecond default program on absolute autopilot. The second an event happens, your brain instantly labels it. Is this fair or unfair? Then it immediately attributes a cause. Did they do this specifically to attack me? This sparks an instant emotion like anger, resentment, or fear. And finally, boom, it forces a behavioral output like arguing or storming off. You might think you're making a conscious choice, but actually you're just executing a default chain of code. In traditional Buddhist terms, this automatic execution is called avidya, which roughly translates to ignorance. But in our modern secular context, it doesn't mean you're uneducated or anything like that. It simply means you don't even realize you are running on a default, unexamined script. Every single unconscious reaction is basically you blindly writing parameters into your cognitive system, reinforcing that exact same old programming without even giving yourself permission to do it. So the absolutely crucial point here is that true cultivation means switching your mental system from auto-tuning over to manual fine-tuning. How do you do that? By using the immense power of active observation. It's actually a lot like the observer effect in quantum mechanics. The sheer act of becoming aware of your thought, the exact moment it arises, acts as a hard pause button. It literally stops the automatic collapse into a negative behavior, which allows you to manually rewrite the code of your reaction in real time. But we do have to acknowledge some individual differences here. Some people out there are just naturally empathetic and emotionally stable. For them, their operating system might just need a tiny software patch, just a bit of continuous, minor optimization. But others, their underlying logic might be totally built on a foundation of scarcity and a deep victim narrative. So every time they encounter stress, they don't just react, their entire system crashes. It throws a massive blue screen of death. For those folks, a simple optimization isn't going to cut it. They need a complete, from-the-ground-up system reinstallation. Section 4. The ultimate stress test. Finding the temple in the mundane. Thinking you're completely enlightened while sitting quietly in a perfectly silent room is very, very different from being enlightened out in the messy real world. The mundane secular world is actually the most honest, rigorously difficult stress test for your new cognitive system. Your demanding boss, horrific traffic jams, wildly misunderstood group chat texts, a delivery driver leaving your package out in the pouring rain, these aren't just mere annoyances. They are specifically push test cases. When you get aggressively cut off in traffic, do you lay on the horn and scream, or do you briefly think, hey, they must be in a terrible hurry, and just let it go? That tiny split-second difference reveals the exact version number of your current operating system. If your system totally freezes the moment real, unpredictable life happens, well, it proves that hiding away in a peaceful monastery might actually lead you further away from building true resilience. The mundane world itself is actually the ultimate temple simply because it provides endless, real-time stimuli to aggressively debug your mind. But all of this brings up a massive, really valid concern. Does fixing your code make you into some kind of emotionless robot? A really common fear is that this type of practice leads to emotional numbness, that you'll just stop caring about your family, your friends, or the world at large. But Wang strongly stresses that blocking out the world's joys and sorrows isn't awakening, it's literally just welding the door shut. True practice doesn't build a thick, concrete wall around you, it actually makes you transparent. Section 5. 3 Levels of Harmony. The stages of a refined OS. So what does a successfully upgraded system actually look like in practice? Instead of emotional insulation, a beautifully refined operating system naturally progresses through a very specific timeline. It moves continuously outward. It starts with how you treat yourself, evolves into how you engage with your peers, and ultimately expands to how you seamlessly flow with the entire surrounding environment. Level 1 is inner harmony. Basically, this means your internal narrative completely stops fighting itself. You no longer aggressively scold yourself for making small mistakes while simultaneously pretending outwardly that you don't care at all. You don't desperately crave external validation anymore, and maybe most importantly, you are entirely comfortable just sitting alone in a quiet room with your thoughts without desperately needing your phone or social media to fill up an empty void. You are fully consistent inside and out. Building right on top of that, we reach Level 2, interpersonal harmony. Have you ever met someone whose mere physical presence just makes you feel completely, totally relaxed? That's because they've entirely stopped labeling and judging the people around them. When you finally stopped expecting people to perfectly fit your rigid mental model of how they should be acting, you create this incredible energy field where others feel totally safe to finally drop their own heavy social masks too. And finally, we reach Level 3, world harmony. In traditional Buddhist terms, this is known as the state of dwelling nowhere. What that means practically is that you care deeply and you readily help others, but you don't sit around demanding their gratitude in return. You engage absolutely fully with life, but you are never held hostage by clinging attachments or hyper-specific outcomes. You are entirely, radically open to the world because you care so profoundly that you no longer feel the need to prove it to anyone. Achieving these states isn't a one-and-done deal, though. It requires constant, lifelong debugging. The Buddha's ancient phrase, Autopilot, reminds us of a hard truth. No teacher, no book, and no explainer can debug your mind for you. You have to be an island unto yourself. Your mental system doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. Actually, scratch that. Thinking it's perfect is honestly just a brand new bug in itself. It just needs to stay open, highly adaptable, and constantly fine-tuned by you. Section 6. The final unanswered question. The paradox of non-self. As we wrap up this explainer, Wang leaves us with one profound, inherent limitation of this entire cognitive framework we've been discussing. We've talked extensively about using logic and active awareness to carefully observe and dismantle your default autopilot programs. But at the very end of that whole process, you are ultimately left staring directly at the entity that is doing the dismantling. If you've stepped back to observe your operating system, who exactly is the observer? And this brings us right to the profound, slightly dizzying paradox of non-self. Think about it. If the I doing the observing is just another constructed mental framework, just another piece of highly complex software, then who or what is actually running your operating system? What is the true bedrock starting point of your own consciousness? It's a massive question that pure logic and reason alone might honestly never solve. So I want to leave you with this thought. The very next time your system crashes and a huge emotion flares up, hit pause for a millisecond and ask yourself, who is really the one getting angry right now? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep fine-tuning that OS.